There are multiple ways to import files into your project. We've talked a little bit about them already, but I also want to let you know that if you have this empty space in your project window and you double click on it, what will happen is it will actually open up the import file window for you. I'm going to go ahead and import my Illustrator file and switch it from switch it from footage to composition and retain layer sizes. We'll click open. If I double click on my bounce composition, however, you can see that when I open it up, what happens is that each of the individual layers, basically each frame of this bouncing ball, is represented by a different layer within the document. So a couple different kinds of things to think about. You can also, and if we hide After Effects and jump into my sample files here, if I wanted to open one of these one of these files up inside After Effects, I can also drag and drop, and then you can see that it imports a second element of Tennis Ball 1 in there. And it's really not necessary to do all this sort of duplicate importing into the project, so we'll go ahead and delete some of these. The nice thing about the way that After Effects works is that once you import the file into the project, you're going to be able to use it multiple times within the project and change the way that it's used as we go. So we can get rid of some of these kinds of things, and you can click them and hit delete, or you can drag them down to the little trash can. So there are lots of different ways for you to work with the files as we go. And now what we'll do is just sort of bring your attention to the little icons that we have over here so that you can see how you're given some visual information about what kinds of files you've got to work with here. So there's a couple different ways that you can look at the information that we have here. We've got the icon for composition that looks like we've got the little film sprocket marks there. We have a folder which is organizing our bounce layers. We have an Illustrator file. We have QuickTime.mov files. We have an AIFF, which is an audio file. One thing, and I'll say this again as we work with audio, working with MP3s inside After Effects is never a good idea. They are small files and they're really manageable, but they're so compressed that After Effects just doesn't have the quality that it needs to deal with. We have another composition here. We've got another folder that contains the information from that particular composition. We have a straight up Photoshop file, and again this is flattened, so we've got those pieces all sort of together, and then we have a still frame of the tennis ball JPEG. And as we work with different things, if we create solids, if we create text files, those are all going to be inside After Effects too. And one thing to keep in mind is that the kinds of things that we have inside our project are not actually embedded within the working After Effects project file. These are just referential treatments. So if you delete bounce.ai off of your hard drive, it's not going to be contained inside your After Effects, and then if you've used it in a composition and you try to go into the working file again, you're going to end up with an error. So just keep that in mind. Nothing gets embedded inside the After Effects project except for the things that we create inside After Effects. So again, just something to keep in mind. And the reason for this is that it keeps the After Effects project file small. It also lets you modify the project outside, or it lets you modify these individual files outside of After Effects, and then you can work with the updated file inside After Effects easily without having to do a lot of different sort of substitutions, and we'll talk about that as we go. So again, if anything doesn't sound super familiar, just bear with us, and we'll get you there. Once you've imported some different footage and looked at compositions and started to build your project, it's a good idea to save your file. We're just going to go up to File and Save, and you can see that right now my file is called Untitled Project and .aep, which is After Effects project, and we're going to go ahead and save it into my let's see, After Effects, and we'll do New Folder, and I'm just going to call this Working Files, and we're going to call this And so now you can see we've got intro 01 as my file, and if I make any changes without saving it, there's going to be a little asterisk that pops up next to my name here. So for example, if I add another tennis ball to my document here, you can see the asterisk pops up there, and that is just a reminder that I haven't saved the file. After Effects does have an autosave. If we go to After Effects and Preferences and Autosave, you need to select this in order to make sure that it does save your project. 20 minutes seems like a long time, but it's really maybe not what we're looking for. I would say save every 10 minutes, and you can increase that number of project versions as many as you like. I would keep in mind, though, that the total number of project versions that you have saved on your computer is going to start to eat away at the hard drive space. These are not super large files, but they do, start to take up space. So if you think about, if I've got 20 project versions and I'm saving every 10 minutes, that means that I can go back 200 minutes and still get to a version of the file if I have to. So we'll just save that for now and feel like we're a little bit more secure there. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the extra tennis ball from my composition that I have here, and we're just going to talk about some of the different things that we're able to do with the composition that we have now inside After Effects. A composition is basically, it's a sequence of elements. Right now we have this steps 3 open. It's the layers from my Photoshop file, and if I hit the space bar to play, you can see the little red bar moving along. That's letting me know where I am in time inside my timeline. We have a 30-second composition here. If you've been working with video in other projects where you don't actually have to tell the program how long you want something to be before you start, then this is going to be something of a adjustment maybe for you. After Effects needs to know the length of the composition before anything starts, and so you can't just create an open-ended composition. You can always go back and modify the length as you go, but it's going to create either a composition at a default length at the start, which is what happened here with our 30 seconds, or you're going to have to go in and modify it as you go. Now right now, because we have the 4 different layers and they're all consistently visible throughout the entire composition, it looks the same as the static Photoshop file that we have. There's no movement yet, but we've got some different things to think about before we start to get things to move. So right now we've got our tennis ball, and I'm just going to click and drag so that it's behind these 2 little soldier guys here. And if you've worked with Photoshop before and you're familiar with layers, then this is going to make sense. If you're not that comfortable with the layer concept, then this is where we start to explain some different things for you. So we've got our 4 layers, and steps is going to be in the background, and I'm just going to go ahead and lock that off because I don't want to move the position of that yet. When we work with layers, we're working from the top down. So our soldier, and it's this little guy here, the one without the hat, is what's on top. And if I move him in front of the guy with the hat, we can see that he's blocking some of the visibility of our soldier with a hat. And certainly tennis ball is in back there. So we've got this order of 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I pick up my tennis ball, and you can see that there's a bold line that starts to appear in between 1 and 2 as I hover over there, and I drop it in between, we can see that we have soldier and then tennis ball and then soldier with hat, which is what we have here. And then if we want to move this guy into the top, and then we can move him over. So you can see that even if you've created a layering status inside Photoshop, you can bring that into After Effects and modify it here. So it's not like you have to go back to Photoshop to change any of that. And being flexible with the position of the layers is something that you're going to have to get used to inside After Effects, so it's good to work with it here. And just as we're kind of considering the overall idea of the composition, just think about as you add different elements to your motion graphic sequence, everything is going to come in as its own layers. So if you add text, if you add shapes, if you add big fields of color, if you add, when we start to get into more sophisticated things, cameras and null objects, we can even have adjustment layers, you know, if you've worked with Photoshop and you're familiar with those. So everything becomes a layer inside our composition, and as we start to work with them, you'll get a lot more comfortable, hopefully, with the way that those work. Now, the compositions that we've worked with already have been generated for us, either by the way that we've imported or by clicking and dragging something down into our timeline. We'll talk a little bit now about what happens when we create a new composition. So if we go to Composition and New Composition, then we get our parameter window that pops up here, and you can see that we have an option for a composition name, and so we'll call this Tennis. And we can have a preset here. If we click on our drop-down menu, you can see that there are a lot of different options. A lot of them have to do with the way that video footage works, and that's because a lot of the times when we're working inside After Effects, we're designing motion graphics to complement specific video formats. Or we can do a custom file there. If I go down to, say, HDV 1080 with 2997. And we'll talk a lot about the different elements of the presets as we get into some of the more complicated things, but we just want to kind of get started now. When we talk about frame rate, that's frames per second, and again, we'll spend some more time on those when we get into the details later. But this is what I'm talking about in terms of the duration of the composition here. Right now it's at 30 seconds. We're going to switch that down to 10. And then we have the option to choose a background color, and I'm going to switch this to blue just to show you how we can do that. Maybe we'll make it a brighter blue. Click OK. And now we have a new composition called Tennis, and you can see it's opened up here, and down here in the timeline we have a composition that doesn't have anything in it. And if I want to add my tennis ball to it, I can click and drag and bring it down, and you can see that my tennis ball is actually sort of morphed in a squished sideways position, and that's because still image is created with square pixels, and an After Effects sequence or composition is created using rectangular pixels. And so if I want to modify this, I can click and drag and just make the adjustment and then work with it that way. If I take a look at the composition or the image size of my Illustrator file, we have a file that is 873 pixels by 480 pixels. And what this is, it's the square pixel equivalent of a rectangular pixel 720 by 480 sequence. And if we're getting ahead of where you are with After Effects, no worries, we'll talk about this more as we go, but just to keep that kind of thing in mind. And so if I move this around, you can see we've got some different placements. We're not adding motion yet, but we will shortly. If I jump over to my Steps 3 layers though, and I click on my tennis ball and I drop it down here into my sequence, you can see that now we have 2 tennis balls, and we'll correct that distortion as well. And one of them has the outside edge of the tennis ball shape eliminated, and the other one doesn't. And this was done inside Photoshop. It was masked out, and so now I have it as a just the tennis ball. Over here, it was just the unaltered image file. And so you can see the difference. So if you mask something out inside Photoshop, then when you bring it into After Effects, you don't have to go to the trouble of doing it, but we can do it here, and we'll talk about that in a future tutorial.